Okay, good luck. Welcome to everybody. And we'll get the show on the road. This is, as you know, the third of this series. So let's make it formal. The name of this series is A New Century But No Peace, State of Israel and the Jewish People in the years 2000 to 2004, before most of you were born. This is the third lecture, which is called Waging War Against Terrorism, the Era of Ariel, Sharon. And this is sponsored by Michael Glazer. None of his parents, are they here yet? His parents, can't see them. Okay, I'm sure they are. There you go. Okay, got it. Dr. Milton and Sandy Glazer. And I got to watch out what I say in front of Michael because this stuff he knows. At least I think so. I think I mentioned last week, I still remember, none of you do, in the 2000 election, I said, I'm afraid if I vote for Bush, you're going to get James Baker again. And you said, no, it's not true. It's got a whole new team and all the rest of it. And I said, Michael's just, dreaming and all that. But he was right and I was wrong. So anyway, so I want to thank, as always, Chumra and Muna for sponsoring us. That is to say, for hosting us, I mean. I want to thank the Lehmann family for sponsoring the series. We want to thank the Glazer family over here for sponsoring tonight. So we have 10 out of 12 covered. So if there's anybody interested in the other two lectures and helping cover them, we have some partial things coming along. So please let me know. And again, as always, we want to thank our tech team for getting things underway. Couldn't do anything without it. And the truth is, without the sponsors, I was just thinking when I come here, when I was walking here, I don't think there's any place in the United States where we do this. And certainly not for free, right? So so I really do want to thank all the people and the sponsors and everything like that, and so should you. Now, without any further ado, let's get down to business. And we're talking about the era of Sharon. This, of course, is Ariel Sharon in the last part of his life, as we know. At the time I'm talking about, he's in his 70s, okay? And by the time his term is over, he have a stroke. Let me remember that. So he just checked out. So, but we're talking about 2000, before that happened. And I'll get right to it. The Israeli election was in February 6, 2001. I put 2021, 2001. So in other words, right immediately after George W. Bush got inaugurated. So you can see that we have new leadership in both countries. The Israeli election takes place right during the Second Intifada, which invigorated and grew the right. What I mean by that is one of the things that has killed the Israeli left in terms of getting votes. I think, in the last election, the Meretz was blown away, and the Labor Party is very small. And this was not historically the case. So for the 21st century, the Israeli left wing, which is, I'm talking about the Zionist left again. These are the people fighting the armies and so forth, but they're very pro-peace and whatever. They've been out of power. It's interesting. And one of the reasons out of power is, who's there to talk to? Look what the Arabs are doing to us. Every time there was a terrorist bombing or something like that, that just made people say, heck with this, we want to go to the right. Now, keep that in mind when we have this election we're talking about in February of 2001, because this is a unique election, more or less, in Israeli history. It's not what you think. It's not a Knesset election, right? So we say, what are you talking about? I will remind you that these political science professors came up in the 90s with this idea that the reason we have this bad dysfunction in the Israeli system, so from their point of view, the government is always hostage of the religious parties. And this is because of the nature of the coalition politics. But if we have sort of like something like the American system, where in this country we have a presidential election, as you know, it's for one guy. And that guy is supposed to lead the country. Now, it's not the same thing, because in this country we have separation of powers. As you know, the president is not the Congress, not yet anyway. And the way it goes is that we have, a very distinct set of institutions. In Israel, there's no such thing as separation of powers. As a matter of fact, Israel, I might remind you, has a unicameral legislature. They do not have two houses of Congress. That's just interesting. That's a very conservative 18th century notion that you don't want anything run. Israel has a board of directors of 120. Again, they can do whatever they want. You understand? And, maybe if 61 is not enough, but 71 and 81 is certainly enough, and they can do whatever they want. So there was an election for a prime minister, and it's one of the only ones of its kind, because after it they scrapped this. The 1999 Knesset remained until in place. So this is going to sound a little confusing. I'll say it once. The Knesset was there from 1999 to 2003. In the middle of that, they had a separate election, who should be the prime minister. That's a little bit silly, because suppose they elected me the prime minister, for argument's sake, but I can't get 61 people to form a government. So what's the point? You understand? It's not a separate institution like the presidency of the United States. We've certainly had presidents many times in which the president, let's say, for example, is Republican and the Senate and the House are Democratic, or vice versa, right? In Israel, it's not possible because the government is run by the majority of the Knesset. In spite of everything I just said, they had the idea that this somehow or other would beat off the religious parties and their schita, as they call it, their extortion. And the result, therefore, is that you had this same group in power. So in other words, the number one party is the Labor Party. That's what that is, with 26. And the number two party is 19. Shas at that time had 17 seats. That's not talking Yaguda. It's not talking the Mizrahi. That's the Shas, okay? And then so on and so forth. This will not change. Instead, it was, like I say, like a presidential thing. So you're in Israel. It's the middle of the second intifada. They're blowing up stuff everywhere. They're stabbing people everywhere. And now you're having an election. Do you want the Rosh HaMemshalah to be Ehud Barak or Ariel Sharon? That's what it is. And Sharon, as you know, had quite a past. I mean, I have to tell everybody. Many viewed him as a monster, and therefore unelectable. And maybe in many years he was. Among other things, everybody in the Likud remembers they say Sharon killed Begin because he led him into the 1982 Lebanon war, and he fooled him, and that broke Begin's heart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Sharon did this, and Sharon did that. I think we all know this. And in 2001, he was 73, and he was fat. I mean, really fat, okay, as you'll see. Had it not been for the Intifada, I don't think he would be a contender. But in the context of the Intifada, his talent seemed to be the right match. No, the Arabs are killing everybody, blowing up all the rest of it. We need somebody like him. Now, for peacetime, it's a little bit like Churchill. You understand? Ordinarily, he wouldn't be elected. But now, under these circumstances, he's the right guy for the job. At least that's what the Israeli voters thought. Now, you think that the other guy, Ehud Barak, also would have good military record, which he did, and he'd be a commando and all that kind of stuff. He really did. But his reputation unraveled at being a prime minister because they opened up all this killing, and Israel couldn't stop it. And in the middle of that, he tried to give away the store. So the people in Israel said, I guess the heck with that. And the direct election process also helped Ariel Sharon. It's not like he was leading a party and has to contend against the Labor Party election. It's a personality contest, which is what the American presidential elections are. Right? We certainly had that last week. It's Trump's personality versus Kamala's personality. And that's what it boils down to. Okay? So he'd always, I'll tell you what I mean. In Israel, the religious bloc, I'm talking about in terms of votes. I mean, that's an important electoral bloc. I don't say it makes or breaks anything, but it's very good to have in your side. Let's say they're 10%, I don't know, whatever it is. But, you know, they're all going to vote one way. You see? And so Sharon had always cultivated a reputation as someone distinctly secular, but sympathetic to religion and religious Jews. There's a picture. Look at this. This is during the Karem invasion in 1968. Okay? Doesn't matter. So the soldiers across the Jordan River and are fighting in Jordan. And here's the Israeli generals and so forth waiting. And there's Rabbi Goren, of course, saying Tehillim. And so is Sharon. From the little, those little Tehillims. And so is General Rachavam Zevi. Gandhi, as they call him. And that's part of the culture. In other words, you're secular, you don't keep Shabbos, all the rest of it. But on certain occasions, especially connected with Rabbi Goren and the others, you don't say it like this, I don't believe in that stuff. You get it? That doesn't help anybody. Go along. And Sharon also, who was a politician, always made it his business to kiss up to Chabad, meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe when he's in New York, and things like this. All this kissing up paid off, because the Frum voted for him over Barak, and Barak never bothered to cultivate such ties. He really was distinctly secular. To him, religious was just like another world. You see, that's not good when you have a direct presidential election. In direct presidential election, you want every little group that you can get. You know, headhunters for Trump. You know what I'm saying? You want anything you can get. And, I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers this. I remember this. In this election, Sharon, who was a big eater, he went to Gerlitz. Remember Gerlitz restaurant in Geula? Right? And he came without any bodyguards. And people were freaking out all over. He says, I don't need bodyguards. I'm among my fellow Jews. And things like this. Now, this wins people over. These are gestures. You get it? These are grand gestures. And the result was that Ariel Sharon he trounced him. Look at the numbers. It was 68 to 32. Right? Look, there's the numbers that count. 62 to 37, I'm sorry. That's still very big. I mean, imagine an American president. I don't believe any American president got 62, maybe Nixon. Right? Maybe Nixon. I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't think so. That's a lot, 62. Anyhow, now, having trashed the direct election system, meaning, once I told you what its problems were, and it was canceled, let's look at the positive side of this phenomenon. Because in terms of Israel's crisis at that time, and I told you at the beginning of this series, even though it's only happened 24 years ago, this is ancient history. I'm sure nobody remembers most of this, most of you. And we have such a crisis now, who the heck can remember the crisis of the year 2000? You understand? But if you do remember, or you pull out an old Where We're Going to Win or something like that, you'll see people writing that they're afraid to go out on the streets and things like that. And so, wait a second. Now that you had, in 2001, a prime minister elected by such a decisive majority of the Israeli public, that was a unifying factor. You get it? Notice, this is who the people want. This is who they want. And he's going to lead the fight now against the terrorism. It wasn't like, 61 seats for this side and 59 for the opposition. A little bit like you have now, in which there's a government, but it's always being, attacked and try to pull it apart and all the rest, in the middle of a war. And it wasn't like that at that time. If the prime minister who's elected knows how to use his authority and not just blow it away, if he knows how to use this authority in terms of bringing about a national unity, because that's ideally what a person who wins a big election should do. It's easier said than done. But in this peculiar circumstances, it kind of lends itself to it, because we're not having an election for the Knesset. The numbers are still the numbers. Clearly, the people want this guy to be the Rosh HaMemshalah. That kind of implies, all right, you be the head of the government, but make a grand coalition. You know what I'm saying? Knows everybody should get on board and put politics aside for the moment while we fight against suicide bombing and things like this. And it worked. That's the difference between then and now, I'm sorry to say. Okay? Ariel Sharon did indeed know how to use it, and it was most necessary during a war against asymmetrical terrorism that took place in this period of 2001 to 2004. We have to deal with bombs all the time. We have to deal with stabbings all the time. At least, let's get a united Jewish response of the overwhelming majority of the country who wants to stop the bombings, of course, and stop the terrorism and all the rest of it. And, let's stand behind this guy. How did he do it? Once elected, Sharon formed a wall-to-wall coalition. This is an impressive accomplishment by itself. It's what I call Winston Churchill Octus move, which is great to have when you're fighting an intifada. So people don't remember this. The Labor Party was part of the government. For example, I think Shimon Peres was the foreign minister. I think Shimon Peres was the foreign minister. Hold on for a second. Hold on. Ben Eliezer, who was a Labor Party, was a defense minister. These are the guys in charge of the army. It's part and part. You can see on the side. And half of it's Labor and all this, and half of it's Likud and the Shas and so forth. Everybody's at the table, you see? And that's how they waged the war that they had to wage during the years during the first Bush administration. So there wasn't an opposition formally in the Knesset, because just about everybody, except a few, just about everybody is in the government. That's kind of important. As I say before, it's very famous if you remember. Nobody's old enough to remember. Let's go to the next one. Churchill, one of the famous cartoons by David Lowe, the famous cartoonist, was Hitler was about to invade Germany. Churchill was named prime minister, and he formed the government of all the parties, the Labour, the Liberals, the this and that and the other, and they said, we're all behind you. And that's how England fought the war in World War II. It's necessary. If you have somebody doing this and the opposition is criticizing all the time, which you can do in a democracy, then it's bad news. We know this from Vietnam. We know this from the Vietnam. Okay, at that time, there was Israel and Palestine, meaning the Palestinian territory run officially during these years by Arafat, which included a number of blotches, as I call them, in the West Bank and Gaza. The IDF had withdrawn from those territories. So here you have, these are the blotches, you know? You understand? In other words, this wasn't there. This is ruled by them, and this is ruled by them, and this is ruled by them, and so on and so forth. This is the first stage of the Oslo process, and it kind of still is. Right? It's not substantially changed. The Palestinians, they keep saying, when's the second stage? I want to get the rest of this. I understand that, but it hasn't happened. Okay? So this is the reality of it. So the point is like this. What's the problem with these blotches? In those years, I'm talking about 2001, the Israeli army never went into there. That's going to come later. Okay? So what you see on TV shows and all this, these are operations inside Ramallah and all, that didn't happen. It's the years when they said, we're putting the Arabs under a good word. You understand? And so that's where all the suicide bombings originate. You understand? The fact that you had a place which is all under the Arabs, and there's no Israelis, and it's supposed to be under the good word of Arafat that he won't allow terrorism to emerge from these places, you know what that's worth. This was the problem, okay? This was the problem. Now, the suicide bombers come from the blotches, as I call them, and so Israel said to Arafat, stop them. The problem, of course, was Arafat did not really control the blotches. He's officially in charge. That's not he was completely in control. He could if he wanted to, but that would cause a Palestinian civil war with the Hamas and company. He already had many groups, today let's call them Hamas, at that time, and they said, we never agreed to the Oslo Agreement. We never agreed to the existence of Israel under any circumstances, including Tel Aviv. We want to continue the fight, and you, Arafat, better not get in our way. You understand? Now, the statesman, now I'm going to say something that's prejudice on our part. The statesman-like approach is to say like this, I will suppress anyone who's breaking the Oslo Agreement. And therefore, I demonstrate we have a real government, and that should prove your confidence, and you give us the rest of the West Bank or something like that, right? But Arafat said like this, first of all, if we take on the Hamas, who knows if I'll win? And second of all, I don't want to be an Uncle Tom. That's what they'll call me, a traitor. But the whole basis of the Oslo Agreement was exactly that he would be Israel's copy, but Israel's Uncle Tom. I mean, that's what you signed up for. Understand? If you read the Oslo Agreement, it's saying that you will take over this area, and you'll control, you'll make sure no terrorism comes out of there. How do you do that? You have to suppress any attempt to do that. In the history of Ireland, India, many countries, Israel also, tell you the truth. That's why that's when Ben Gurion blew up the Begin ship. Remember that, Daltalina? And this was the reasoning, right or wrong, but this was the reasoning, which is we're not going to have a separate group here. There's one government in Israel, and this government is a responsible government. We're not going to have anybody else bringing weapons and this and that, the other, doing their own thing. And by the way, that worked, because after that, blowing up that ship, as tragic as that was, there's like one government in Israel, and one army, and one everything. And that's what we call a normal country. There's not 2 armies in France. There's not 3 armies in Germany, 4 armies in Russia, 5 groups here and there. Now, there are in some of these African and other third world countries. You got that. So the difference between a failed state and a real state is what we're talking about. Now, Israel can't afford, experiments of the third world variety next door. You get it? So this was the background to understand what's going on now. Rabin and Barak and Sharon, the prime ministers, said to Arafat, with power comes responsibility. So you want the power to be head of the Palestinian state? We said we'll do it, but you have the responsibility of curbing and making sure, cracking down on your own militants, let's put it that way. That was the basis of the two-state solution. Remember, it's supposed to be two states, side by side, in peace and security. That means no bombs, no stabbings, no terrorism. But did Arafat really see himself as leading the Palestinians to a two-state solution, thinking small? So it'll be a state in the West Bank and a state in Gaza, and the rest will be Israel? Did he really? No, is that his long-term program? No. Arafat thought of twisting and turning and using salami tactics until he got the whole thing. In other words, meanwhile, let's get the blotches. Then let's expand the blotches. Eventually, we get the whole West Bank. And then we start working on the rest of it. I told you already long ago, I'm sure that the next move, if they would get the whole business, is to say, look, the Galilee has a rove of Arabs. The majority of the population in the Galilee are Arabs. So they should not break off and be part of the Palestinian state. And you start the same business with bombs and threats and terrorism and all the rest of it to bring that about. And once you do that, then you work on the negative. And, in other words, that's the salami tactics. Now, he entered the Oslo process, I'm talking about Arafat, not with a sense of stability and finality, but with a sense of fluidity and opportunism. Let's see where this can lead. Rabin and the Israelis said, I guess, we're willing to make concessions for a deal, a final deal. After this, the war's over, and you go about your business, and we go about our business, and there's no more terrorism. All right. And under Rabin and Peres and Barak, that's the 90s. Rabin, who was killed in 95, Peres, until Bibi was elected, and Barak, who came in after Bibi had a bad term of a year and a half. Arafat got the best of both worlds. There were ceaseless suicide bombings, and there were continuing negotiations with Israel. All during I think you know this, all during the 90s, they had suicide stuff. Remember the bus stops? The soldiers killed, and the tramps and things like that. They had this. And that didn't mean that Rabin or Peres or Ariel Barak stopped negotiating. As a matter of fact, even after all the terrorism at the Camp David conference in 2000, when Bill Clinton was there, as I say, Barak wanted to give away the whole store, including the Har Bayis. With the idea, of course, I'm serious now, with the idea, of course, that now you really will stop the terrorism. So you know the old line, it's like the drunk. I'm not going to drink anymore, and this time I really mean it. You understand? So this was the problem. Give me more than blotches. And you need a final settlement, don't you? And the suicide bombings will hopefully put pressure on you Israelis, to be more forthcoming in order to stop the bombing. And that really was the message, the unspoken message of Arafat, which is the communist tactic, which is the third world tactic, which means we get to keep fighting and you negotiate while we're fighting. You understand? You negotiate while we're fighting. And of course, wink, wink, the bombing will never actually stop. In the long run, Arafat figures, all the Palestinians figure, I'm going to repeat what I just said, all the Palestinians figure in the long run, the Jews will drive the Jews out of Palestine. Yeah, this terrorism tactic work, that terrorism, will give them another October 7th, another 2 October 7th. I mean, that's what they say. It's not something I'm intuiting, that's what they say, right? I think everybody here remembers, shortly after October 7th, the Hamas spokesman said, I guess, we're going to do it again, right? What's the svara? We'll drive you out. Like they drove the French out of Algeria and drove the British out of India, all the rest of it. The Jews have nowhere to go, no other country. They'll go somewhere, like that. 7 million Jews, it'll happen. You see? So it's a matter of mentality. So I'm on the political side, Arafat basically thought. Hamas will be the terrorist side, and between the two of us, we'll triumph. All I need to do is maintain my plausible deniability. That's what Ben-Gurion and Begin did. Under the British, the Irgun blew up everything. Ben-Gurion said, it's not us doing it. And nevertheless, the terrorism drove the British out, and we got our state. Arafat, after all, think about it. What's the plan of Hamas today? Today, do you literally fight to kill 7 million Israelis? I mean, that's like physically hard. It wasn't so easy for Hitler. And he had all these people in his grasp, in his palm. He controlled them. It took him a while to kill. Now, he did it. They killed 6 million. You have to set up, gas chambers and all this kind of stuff. It's not so Prussian. You get it? So what's the plan? No, you make life so miserable, the Jews will quit, like the French did in Algeria. Even then, though, a surrender must be negotiated. And for that, we have the PLO. That's how Arafat figured. Now, the Israeli right wing had charged this from the beginning, but the Israeli left wing argued differently. You're misreading Arafat. He can't be that unrealistic as well as unreasonable, and it wouldn't work even if he tried it. And in the end, we have no choice. Listen, they're here, and we're here. We have to work something out. It's that way of talking, all right? So, indeed, as I told you before, in the midst of all the suicide bombings, Ehud Barak offered to give away the story, and it didn't work because Arafat wouldn't take the deal, as we know. That was in Bill Clinton's last year. And now, in addition to the suicide bombings of the 1990s, let's add the suicide bombings of the Second Intifada. You understand? Of the Second Intifada, which is now raging. So the bombings never really stopped from the 90s into the early 21st century. I don't think we lived through it, so we weren't aware of this timeline. We didn't think of it the way, that's what history does. You look back and you can sort of see in the kind of a context, I think. At that time, you just said, listen, the Arabs have terrorism. You hope when you go to Israel, it won't be in the bus that you're taking. And if you're American, you'll say, I'll take cabs. And you hope there won't be a cab thing. I mean, that's what they did, right? Here. Hold on for a second. I think this is what I'm looking for. And they had over here, yeah, hold on for a second. Hold this for a second. Right in the middle of all this, just before the election, you had the lynching of two Israeli soldiers. I think you remember this. The two soldiers drove by mistake into the wrong village. It was, I think it was Ramallah. It doesn't matter. And you'll see, they literally ripped them apart. That happened today in Shabbos in Israel. I saw before I went here, some from Jew, by mistake, drove into Abu Dis, right next to Jerusalem, and like he was attacked, all the rest of it, the Palestinian police saved his life and got him out of there. But they did not do that in October 2000, which is exactly when all this stuff was going on. Go ahead.
20 years ago today, 2 Israeli soldiers were reported to their base in Bethel. One was about to become a father, the other one was a father of 3 young children, Vadim Norzhitz and Yossi Abrahami. Tragically, they didn't know their way so well and made a mistake. It turned out to be the mistake of their life. They reached the entrance of Ramallah. In Ramallah, they were pulled out from their car and brought to the police station in town. They were taken to the 2nd floor. Very quickly, the rumor spread that there are 2 Israeli soldiers arrested in the Palestinian police station. The mob began to arrive. They demanded the policemen to bring them down, the 2 soldiers. They wanted to lynch them. Not only the police did not stop the angry crowd, they decided to carry out the lynching themselves. They beat instead the Israeli soldiers with metal poles and knives, and then they threw the body of one of the soldiers to the angry crowd. The mob tore the body to shreds and lit it on fire. 20 years later, we are pursuing justice for the families. We received an unprecedented decision finding the Palestinian Authority responsible for this horrible lynching. They will have to pay. Our message is clear. There is a price for Jewish blood, and nobody can kill a Jew and go without pay.
Now, this is from 2021, which is already ancient history. There was a question of paying, the family and stuff like that. So what's no good to us is, look what was going on. And you saw they smashed the bodies up, all this kind of stuff. And guy, do you remember this? He held his thing in the mirror, this is the blood, and so forth in Ramallah. It was this set of circumstances, as I said before, that led Sharon to crush Barak. I mean, that's why I said 62 to 37. Sharon came into office, pledged to prioritize the fight. I mean, why do you elect Ariel Sharon? And he had experience in 1970 in Gaza. If anybody remembers, it's before the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was in charge of Gaza and the West Bank. And it was a whole outbreak of violence. At that time it was al-Fatah and that sort of thing. And they couldn't control it. And Golda Meir said, I'm putting Sharon in charge. She didn't like him. And he basically organized a bunch of cowboys, and they made like these charts. And every time they killed one of the terrorists, they scratched out charts. In other words, you're not terrorizing us, we're going to terrorize you. And they had Israel, this is like Fauda type thing, you You have soldiers hiding in trees, Israeli soldiers, and underneath sewers, sewer covers, and places like that. So in other words, instead of you hunting us, we're hunting you. They murdered, pretty much killed almost all the guys over here. He had this guy, Meir Dagan, as we'll see in a second, and it became famous that he stopped the terrorism by the only way you can stop terrorism, by killing all these guys. There's no other way. You hear what I just said? No, because they won't stop. And they'll tell you they won't stop. Okay? Now, at that time, Israel was in charge of the West Bank and the Gaza, and it was a different time, 1970. It was a different time and all the rest of it, and that's true. But nevertheless, he said like this. I mean, he comes in with this mentality, which is the only way to stop these guys is to kill them all. That's it. It's easier said than done. He had these wild and crazy guys, as you can see. Look at this. He caught this is Meir Dagan. He caught the attention of Sharon and recruited him to a special unit known Ramon, whose task was to hunt suspected terrorists in the Gaza Strip and eliminate them. That's called killing. Right? Sharon said Dagan had succeeded in separating an Arab from his head. In 1971, he got a Medal of Honor for tackling a wanted terrorist holding a hand grenade. This is why I call wild and crazy guys. In other words, this is how you do in any army, the Israeli army. You pick from the people, like one of these movies, the guy who's got the skills you want, which is you have to be a little mashuga. But a regular soldier, Sergeant Bilko cannot handle a terrorist. Like I tell you, Mikhail's Navy cannot handle a terrorist. You got to have a killer. And so from day one, Ariel Sharon, now the prime minister, made sure to reach coordination and agreement with the Bush administration. That was a smart move. In other words, he thought about it like a general. And do me a favor. Oh, you have plans here. He thought like a general. And that means you have to plan something out logically. How are you going to go after terrorists? Either the Americans will stop you or something. And so you have to go to the new administration and work out with them an agreement that they'll be okay with you doing this. Now, in order to do that, you have to say like this. I'm not going to negotiate with the Arabs while they're committing terrorism, but when it's over, we will negotiate. Okay? But meanwhile, you, George Bush, should understand that we have to do this for our own, as a basic. You wouldn't, negotiate under the gun. Here, take a look at this. This is when Sharon goes to the Har Bayis.
ביקורם חולל שם מהומה, למקום הגיעו מאות פלסטינים כדי למנוע את הביקור. בהתנגשויות נפצעו 20 שוטרים מיידוי אבנים ו8 פלסטינים נפגעו מירי כדורי גומי.
אני עולה עם שרון, אני מקבל אותו בשער המוגרבים. הוא הגיע עם 13 חברי כנסת. אנחנו ידענו שחברי כנסת הערבים ממתינים לו על ההר, שזה גם דבר שמייצר איזשהם אנרגיות. בהר ידענו שעל ההר יהיו אלפי אנשים.
עולים דרך הגשר לשער המוגרבים, היה
Yeah, this is when he went up on the mountain, and this started the whole intifada. They were planning it anyway. And you see, by the way, he's not on Ozempic or anything like that. And the result is that he knows, what's the score. And he tells Bush, I'm ready for serious negotiations with Palestinians, even certain concessions. And he has maps to show him. But only when the terror is eliminated, I will not negotiate under the gun. Now, Bush says, that makes sense to me. Okay? Now, right? That makes sense to me. He also determined to kill as many terrorists as he could, like he did before in Gaza. For Sharon, the only good terrorist is a dead terrorist. Remember, you're dealing with Hamas over here. I want you to understand, we're in 2001, you're dealing with Hamas. Today, I don't even have to describe who Hamas is. They've become very famous in the last year. But they were the same thing back then. As he communicated to his subordinates down the line, he says, look, I'm here and I'm ready to fight, so let's do something. This was Sharon at his best. What I mean to say is that even though he's full of bluster, and he was disliked and this, that, and the other, if you ever know who he was on the battlefield as a commander, he's really very good if you study this. Very calm, soothing, giving out directions, and when things don't work, he said, okay, let's work on this. He wasn't what you think, right? Especially in the Yom Kippur War. It's very interesting. They were freaking out and panicking. He came on the Suez Canal. He told the people in the bunker, well, just hold out, don't worry. I know you're in trouble. We'll come and get you. He told the soldiers in the wounded tanks, I understand you're wounded, stay out of the way. And he did all the things he needed to do as a commander. So he was used to command. And the command isn't simply, by the way, you all do this. You have to say, you do this, and while you're doing this, this and this, is there any issue? And somebody says, what about this and this? Okay, let's deal with this. In other words, you don't scream at people and, just angry and bang the table and that kind of stuff. That's not a good commander. Good commander says like this, how can we solve this problem? Okay, we have a problem over here. Let's make this work. And that's who he was. I think you know that. And to the Mossad and the Shin Bet, he says, I want everybody to think outside the box. I want new ideas. This is the origin of the origin of the origin 23 years later of the pagers. It's new way. You got to do something besides the old way, you see? Now, it took him a little while, but that's the idea. Interestingly, Sharon waged the war not so much with the IDF. He didn't trust the army anymore because he blamed them for the Lebanon debacle. I don't know if it's true or not, but he fought them like with these Fauda type groups. You understand? Specialized units, undercover, assassinations, bombs, the type of thing they show in the movies. That really, I would say really it starts mainly here. In other words, he said, you have to fight asymmetrical warfare asymmetrically. You understand? So, for example, you get you get the soldiers disguised as Arabs to infiltrate their headquarters to go in and surprise them and blow up their shops and things like that. That's not according to the military war. This is not a regular military war. If the Egyptian army was over here and the Israeli over here, that calls for a certain type of tactics. If you can't see these guys, they're hiding out in the population over here, then you have to be sneaky and do counter-sneaky stuff. That's basically what it boils down to, right? But he couldn't stop it. You may perhaps remember, he came in February, he set up a government by March. Already in May, the Arabs blew up this whole Sharon Mall. It's like you put a bomb, in a canyon. Actually, I think that the guard blocked it at the beginning, so they only blew up the front, but they still killed a bunch of people. Right? If he'd been inside, it would have been even worse. 2 weeks later, this same May, the Dolphinarium, if anybody remembers that, which is that they, blew up this discotheque, which had all these young people, Russian Jews who immigrated to Israel. And see, it's a little bit like that rave, that they killed in Gaza, in the border of Gaza. Whole bunch of teens, when discos were in, and they were carrying one, and they blew up a whole thing over there. And they were cheering in Ramallah, okay? So in other words, like they were cheering in Gaza when they killed everybody and tortured everybody on October 7th. Nothing could stop the suicide bombings, as the perpetrators were willing to die. See, that's the genius of it. It's not like you create conditions in which there are threats. The guy's going in, or the girl is going in planning to die. So it's almost, I don't say it's impossible, but it's very, very difficult to screen every single person, and only one has to get through. That's the bad arithmetic of this whole thing. In December, there was a big suicide bomb, if anybody remembers, in Ben Yehuda, the pedestrian mall in Yerushalayim, 11 dead. And the next day, a bomb blew up a bus in Haifa with 15 dead and 40 wounded, if you remember that. And Kohena, I could just sit here all night and rattle off, and you see each one's on the Wikipedia. You can find all the gruesome details. The culmination was the Netanya massacre at the Passover Seder. Anybody remember that? Right? When they came in and they just killed everybody at the Seder. So let's put it this way. Was this a victory? Let's go to the next one. It's a victory for terrorism. Here, the Israeli general himself, the defense minister, said it was a national trauma. It cast upon us a loss of life, damage to our national security, damage to our economy, no tourism, people scared to go shopping malls, scared to sit in restaurants, don't ride in buses. That's what terrorism wants. You get it? This is what it's all about. See, terrorism, I say, is asymmetrical warfare. It's not like an army that can physically conquer a country, but we play with your mind. You understand? If you scare a whole country, you want a victory. You can sometimes get the enemy to do something because they're scared or freaked out that he wouldn't do on a battlefield. You see? After all, the purpose of war is to impose your will on the other side. That's Clausewitz. War is politics by other means. Politics means you're trying to get something done politically, and you can't use peaceful means. You understand? You're trying to get something done politically. You want to defeat the other side. You want the other side to give you territory. You want to, whatever your goal is. So who was the big, cui bono, who was the big winners in the terrorism period? This is a Marxist question. The cab drivers. People didn't take buses. It was a golden age for the cab drivers. Listen, there's always somebody that benefits in some situation, right? Were there people who benefited in the COVID? Big time. You see? Ariel Sharon is frustrated by the Mossad. He appoints a new head with orders to kill, kill, kill. And that's the old guy we saw before, Meir Dagan. He said, I used you back 30 years ago, 31 years ago, 32 years ago in Gaza. Let's repeat it. So this is a little bit like one of these movies where the old guys come back, years ago. I think there were cowboy movies like this or something like that. Whatever it is, the old guys come back. Sharon is 73. This guy is whatever, all the rest of it. But we got the smarts. You see, we have the experience. And I know your character. And so this is what it was. And basically, you hope you go for the head of the snake, which means there's no point killing the suicide bombers. That's almost an oxymoron. The guys who send them, right? The guys who send them. But it's not so simple, because even if you kill the guys who send them, as Israel's learning today, there's somebody who takes their place. So you got to go after the whole food chain. You understand? You have to go to the food chain. You find out who's buying the money, who's making the weapons, where they have the shops, who's recruiting people, the whole infrastructure. That's a tall task. But on the other hand, if you shatter that, maybe you can win. I don't know if that's true. Israel shattered the infrastructure to Hezbollah, but they're still fighting. They're still fighting. This is the problem, my friends. It's not a story like the Six-Day War, where there's a clear enemy and you win a victory and it's over. And even then it wasn't really over. Here, the terrorism, the asymmetrical warfare, is simply something. It's like, you just got to get used to the fact it doesn't stop. It does not stop. Now, I'll tell you again, a couple of years ago, you and I know this, in Israel, leftists, and I mean this in a good way, always had these songs about peace, and they're hoping that tomorrow will be no war. There's a million songs like that, and I don't blame them a bit. And especially imagine if you have a child or something like that in the army. I get it. And so you want no more war. But what if that's not an option? So some people say like this, I'm leaving the country. I can't live like that. That's what the other side wants. You understand? That's the nature of asymmetrical warfare. I want you to say, since it'll never stop, you might as well give up now. So it's a complex story. That's how it goes. We forget that for a long time, Israel was quite discriminating. In the old days, before Sharon, it was fastidious in its targeted assassinations. They had to get a whole chain of command. The prime minister had to agree. And when they did it, it was only this person, not this person. I think you remember this story. Back in George Bush Sr.'s time, they went to Tunisia, and they killed Abu something or other, and right in front of his family. And then they ran away. And Israel said, we didn't do it. And George Bush says, I know Israel did it because they didn't shoot the family. George Bush Sr. They didn't shoot the family. Now that's not true. Now they'll blow up people and all the rest of it. If there's collateral damage, it's collateral damage. We can't afford this now. I don't want to lose people because we're worried about this. Anyway, it's an attitude. And Sharon brings in this attitude, which is there till today. I'm just trying to show you permanent asymmetrical warfare breeds all kinds of adaptations. Maybe you like them, maybe you don't like them, but that's the way it goes. Okay? And this has been Israel's policy the last 20 years. The logic of assassinations is simple. If I don't kill this person, it's not like the guy behind him is not going to fight us also. I'll just have two people fighting me. So if I kill him, at least I have only one person fighting me. That's the theory. But is it effective in stopping terrorist attacks? That's the question. Is it effective? And as you know, the Arabs respond with tit for tat. Israel killed the head of the Islamic Jihad, so they killed the Israeli general that we saw before saying Tehillim. General Khalm Ze'evi, shot him in an Israeli hotel at this time, you see? So, I mean, the phenomenon of the suicide bombings, you see this in TV, and it shows all the rest of it. And nowadays, we have it everywhere. There are people monitoring things that are going on in the neighborhood. I mean, there's somebody watching, hopefully, what's going on on Park Heights right now. Somebody's supposed to. In Israel, it's all, by this time we're talking about 2001, it's all wired. It's everything being watched. So watch this. I'm a guy or a girl, and I'm watching this and this, and let's say I'm looking at Haifa. I'm looking at the street, and I see somebody suspicious over there. I can't tell for sure. And at the last minute, they're getting on the bus. I say, oh my God, they're going to blow up the bus. And I don't have time to stop anybody, and it blows up in front of me, and I should have noticed this, but the guilt trips give all these people nervous breakdowns. All these Israeli people who are watching the monitors because they can't stay up on top of everything. Of course, when it works, that's great. You feel great. When it doesn't work, you say it's my fault, or to some degree or another. So you got a PTSD for somebody who's not actually in the action zone, who's watching it, but you fail to prevent it. Right? I mean, how would you feel? I'm just making this up. How would you feel? You see the planes heading for the Twin Towers. You got 15 minutes, and you're trying to call everybody, and nobody's listening, and then they crash on the Twin Towers. You say, it's all my fault. You see? A little of this happened in Pearl Harbor, if you know. Right? There was a big snafu, this, that, and the other. It's that kind of a thing. So, on the other hand, with irredeemable groups like Hamas and the PFLP, there's no alternative. They don't want peace, and they'll never stop trying to hurt you. The only thing you can do is kill them. The existential problem, therefore, is in order to be successful, you have to kill them all, but it's not possible to kill them all, or usually it's not possible. Okay? This is what they count on. Ariel Sharon said, we have to unleash against them our latest high tech, which Israel was not doing. You got to go now and use all the surveillance, satellites, and the drones are now introduced, and all that surveillance stuff, especially from what they call Unit 8200, which is like their NSA, National Security Agency. These are guys with the high-tech spook stuff. So you watch them, okay? Now, interesting, by the way, now to show you something. I just saw in Haaretz, I don't know what's going to come of this, but there's an article just the other day by this think tank that, let's go to the next thing. The plan that got thousands of ultra-Orthodox to try to join the army. I don't think it's gotten that yet. The plan is to try to get that. Volunteering. While the war is raging and politicians are bickering, a small, prestigious program is encouraging ultra-Orthodox men to volunteer for all things 8200. No one thought it would work, but the success stories have spread, and the rabbis have given it their blessing. I don't know if it's exactly that way, but it's an interesting thing. This is somebody's proposing this, and some people taking up. You could be in a very, for these units like this, elite units, for high-tech stuff. So you need people with high IQs. You can train them. You need people that have the brain power. So the plan is, take the best people who want to go. This is voluntary. Nobody's being drafted. Take the best people from the best kollels of the black hat and say, if you want, we want you to get a job working for, so you'll be in the army, you won't be in the combat, you'll be in the 8200, helping your brain power to come up with all kind of new stuff, and that's a way to circumvent the opposition, they hope. There's a way to circumvent the opposition of Haredim joining the army, because maybe in this way, you can even wear a suit and all the rest of it. They're trying to come up with some way to accommodate it, and so you can dress the way you usually dress, and you can have a frum framework, I suppose, and maybe it'd be all men. I don't know exactly, and maybe this is a way to integrate into the army. And Israel will get something out of you, and you will be serving the country. You see? Look at this. It's a long article. I only did a bit. 6 years ago, within the framework of the Lehmann nonprofit, which seeks to devise solutions for core issues facing Israeli society, it's a think tank. We came up with a new blueprint for service. Comprehensive and all-inclusive. It was written after lengthy research, and the conclusions were clear. Military-civilian service must encompass everyone in the country. Now, this is before the current war. Okay? Such service should constitute the basic requisite social changes the country has to go, more spaces that promote the cohesion value of service, which take into account the Haredim and the Arabs. The IDF, the police, and all the others are all part of the plan. Every young man and woman 18 is service to ensure they emerge as better citizens committed to others' welfare. That's a lot of fancy talk for saying they want to draft them. Okay? Now, 2 years after the blueprint was written, defenseman at that time, Benny Gantz, gave us the opportunity to implement and fuse it with contact. It was decided the government established a committee to that end, encompassing all parts of Israeli society. Let's go to the next one. One proposal would be presented as a basis for a discussion, our proposal, and the blueprint be framed by all this sort of thing. Anyway, let me get to the main point. More importantly, no longer talk about trying to draft the ultra-Orthodox, but on the contrary, figure a way, they propose, that Haredim want to be drafted. It sounds illogical. How to do it? In cooperation with the IDF and all the rest of it, we approached a unit whose name is known even to the most sheltered Haredi, the 8200. True, the Haredi dream revolves around the life of Torah, but maybe if things don't go well in yeshiva, there'll be Haredi men who want to reach for that secular summit. Maybe it won't be the Torah that sets things in motion, but prestige. According to the 2021 report, National Council, fewer than a third of Haredi men have actually opted for religious studies, and the proportion has been declining by the year. And I know if that's true. I don't think that's true. But let's say, whatever the number is, the point's like this. You're 22, this is my understanding. You're 22, you're 23, 25, whatever it is, and you're in yeshiva and you're married, and call all the rest of it. Now you want to do something, you see? But you don't want to go into a place that'll make you unfrum, and you don't want to go into something that'll, alienate you from your community and all the rest of it. But maybe we can figure some way to meet in the middle. And so our ideas were poo-pooed by various intelligence groups. Why do we need them? Why do we want to lavish budgets on them and all the rest of it? To persuade them, my colleagues at Defense Ministry then, and I had to promise that we would supply them with high-caliber manpower, the highest caliber that exists in Haredi society. It's worth an effort. So in other words, as we say today, people from elite kollels, elite yeshivas, they're smart. They're not educated secularly, that they're smart. But you can give somebody a training. Those who have aptitude for it. Obviously, if you don't have an aptitude for it, it's not going to work. But you give them an aptitude test. The idea is, we establish a Haredi software house whose soldiers will provide services to classified military intelligence units. Win-win. Our side gets outstanding manpower and top quality work. The other one gets an entry ticket into high tech. And they can use this when they leave the service to go into high tech, which, as a frum person, a Haredi person, you can do if you make it your own company in Yerushalayim or wherever, and what do you call it, the Beis Shemesh, right? The fact this would be technologically oriented employment, whose work is remote work, where remote work is quite routine, help with persuasion. You can work out of the house or out of someplace in your neighborhood. Indeed, now the IDF and the Defense Ministry sometimes draw on the help of coders working in software houses outside the bases, right? The big question was, how will we recruit the outstanding Haredim dreamed about? I knew the answer, but was not sure we would succeed. You have a certain college, JBH College, I don't know what that is. With branches in Bnei Brak, Yerushalayim, Beit Shemesh, they run professional programs aimed at integrating yeshiva students to high tech. Every year it transforms dozens of them into rank and file programmers. I had great respect for its work. For a year, I worked with staff at JBH to develop a program. Even though it could have been done quicker during the whole process, we were also building trust. And in 2021, we succeeded in crafting a joint project with a syllabus and all the rest of the stuff. It's called Code, which means the boss. And we aimed at Haredi Men 21, 26, funded by nations. It will publicize and market in Haredi communities. Stressing involves regular service in IDF. Applicants would undergo a screening process jointly organized by the Army, and those selected would attend a prep course in Haredi appropriate classrooms. See what I mean? And they would learn the basic subjects required by Unit 200, 8200, which specialize in collecting signals and all this other high-tech stuff, and certain dispensations. Those serving won't have to wear uniforms and can wear Haredi attire. They wouldn't have to undergo basic training and return every day after work. They work at a software house to be created on premises of 8200, a separate floor, an SA judgment. Yes, kashrus, gender separation, but they would be soldiers. They took a part of the intelligence community with the possibility of later integrating in jobs in the high-tech industry, and so on and so forth. Now, as a person who has that kind of training is going to end up going, you're going to go into high-tech. That's what I would think. I think that's the end of it, right? So there's more. Like I said before, I just saw this 3-4 days ago. And So I don't know if it'll work. Parts of it make sense, parts of it don't 100% make sense. But it is thinking out of the box. That's my point. Thinking out of the box. And at least somebody will say like this: the Army needs all kinds, and this will be one in the brain power, and that's how it goes. Now, the Israeli Army told Sharon, don't give away these things. We're saving them for the next war. You understand? I get that. In other words, I'll give you an example. Some say, why did they use the pagers now? Why didn't they wait till there's some Hezbollah invasion or Syrian invasion of Israel and then do it? So you get more bang for the buck. But the decision, as you know, was made, no, we need it now, and blow them up in Lebanon now. That's what happened in Sharon's time. He said, give me all the high tech and we're going to use it against the terrorists in the West Bank and in Gaza, against Hamas, against the Palestinian Jihad and all these other groups, right? We need them now, and that's an order. With high tech, Israel was able to step up the quantity and quality of the assassinations and jointly and hopefully cripple, at least temporarily, Hamas and company. So in other words, as somebody said, instead of one a month, we do a bunch a week. Now, it sounds very brutal. There's no choice. You see? Now, we're not saying we kill these three guys, that's the end of the whole operation, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, as it goes like that. And so that's what a war is, my friends. In a war, one army's out to kill the other army, and the more the numbers build up, the sooner somebody wins. And now that's why they set up this joint war room, which is something new. Right? You get everybody in the room, the army, the Navy, the Hamas, what am I talking about? The Mossad, all the different groups in there. That's really what they did with Hezbollah. I think you know that. How'd they get Nasrallah? Because there was a combined operation between the Shin Bet and the Air Force and the this and that. It takes a lot of coordination to make these things work. We read about it in the papers. It's not so push to pull off. And it can't be one branch of the service. Now you have to think of interbranch, right? The U.S., as we shall see, had to do this after 9/11. You understand? Used to be the FBI did this, the CIA did this, the NSA did this, all the rest of it. Now it's got to be in a room if you want to fight Osama bin Laden. This is more or less the developments of the 21st century. Now, we see the uses of the drones now in the Gaza war, right? I mean, you saw it. Look, I think everybody saw this. This is when they killed Sinwar. You see the drone, right? Who's making this movie now? It's the drone. You see, it's going into an Arab house. See, you're saving a life. If they shoot at the drone, they're not killing a soldier. You get it? And there they saw Sinwar. That's him. And so there's no Israeli soldiers in there now. It's a drone, right? And you'll see, he sees it coming. He'll throw a stick at it. That's right. Because they knew exactly where he is and nobody else is in the room. See that? But the drone ducked it. I'm serious. If you know how to run it, I'm not one of these things, but if you know how to run it, Bill Sachs could do it. Yeah, you can avoid a stick. What is this called? Asymmetrical counterterrorist warfare, right? They plan to ambush you in the house. So the low-tech way that Israel used to use was dogs. You remember that? To use these canine things. The dog comes in first. So that way, if they shoot the dog, they didn't kill a person. It's not so simple, by the way, because I know maybe it'll sound funny to you, maybe it won't sound funny to you. For the dog thing to work, the dog and the trainer have to be like this close. A lot of times when they kill the dog, the trainer has a nervous breakdown. You get it? In fact, I saw, when I'm in Israel, one of the things I do, I pick up from time to time, is these Army Shalos and Shuvas books. Because they have these military rabbis, and they get all these Shalot in the army, and they're unusual and they're very interesting, and you have to have a different approach. You know what I'm saying? The posek dealing with these situations is dealing obviously with emergency situations. And I remember they had a thing, one of the canines was wounded, and can they helicopter the canine on Shabbos from the front to the hospital to save the life of the canine. Now, ask this question to Moshe Feinstein. He's like, what do you, B'chal shot for a dog? But of course, the point over here was, number one, it'll save somebody else's life there. Second of all, the owner might get, the trainer get a nervous breakdown, which is like be dying in halacha. You get it? So it's the new reality. Now here, they got one step ahead in the newer technology. You don't need a dog. You send in a stick, a drone of some kind or another, and it can see everything, and let's put it this way, it saves your life. I mean, that's the point. It saves your life. You know, you see, there's 3 guys and they're hiding. I know everybody here has followed the war for the last year. If you're not a news junkie, you won't be here tonight. And if you're not Jewish, you see many times, you know, they'll release footage. You see a drone comes in, you see 3 guys hiding over there, and that's how they were able to call in an airstrike and blow them up. You know, this is how it works. This is the new world. These are all attempts to come up with an efficient response to asymmetrical warfare. Now, it can work in the temporary. It doesn't work in the long run because you can't kill everybody. I keep coming back to that. But who cares? If it saves your son's life or somebody else's son's life, you want it, okay? From now on, like I said before, the quantity of hits increased dramatically. This is from the head of the Mossad. Formerly, it had taken the Mossad months, if not years, to plan and implement one hit. Now, it's 4 or 5 a day because of the high tech. You see? You're not sending in a hit squad like they used to do in Tunisia to do this and this. You're finding somebody, you're sending a message to a drone or a helicopter or an Air Force jet, it's boom, it's over. That's it. That's brutal. You guys got brutal on me. You got brutal on me. Okay? Now remember, Ariel Sharon came into office at the beginning of 2001, and he discerned several political facts. Israel needed the backing of the United States. Does anybody remember at the beginning of the Bush administration, they had the Durban conference? It was a United Nations conference in Durban, South Africa, in which they wanted to roast Israel alive. And they passed all these resolutions, and Colin Powell had to leave. I remember, America had a delegation led by Secretary of State Colin Powell, and the middle he says, we want nothing to do with this, and we don't recognize the validity of all this kind of stuff. Now, he knew, Sharon, that Israel needed the backing of the USA, and that the Bush administration hated new settlements. It's used to it. They want, in the long run, to have a 2-state solution. Jewish settlements are antithetical to a Jewish state solution. They see this as, Zionist aggression and all the rest of it, and that's who they were, okay? And Sharon, it's interesting, because he usually thought of as a bulldozer-type general. He said at that time, ha'ipuk hu markiv shel koach. Does anybody know what that means? What is? Restraint, good. Exactly. Restraint is an element of strength, right? So we have to know, when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive. If we want the cooperation of the United States, meaning I need the Bush administration on board with what we're doing in Israel and killing everybody. So we have to do, so secretly agreeing to no new settlements, Sharon won the support of the Bush administration for Israel's targeted killings and its conflict with Arafat. Because Bush said Arafat is the problem. And that's what Sharon wanted. Now, the State Department, if was not so comfortable with this. And Colin Powell and the others kept saying, no, we have to do something with Sharon. And then, it has to be something better than that. But it didn't matter. This friendship that I'm describing was obviously intensified by 9/11. Do we remember what was the Palestinian reaction to 9/11? Here it is.
The atmosphere, the V sign for victory being displayed in East Jerusalem today among jubilant Palestinians that the United States had been subject to this attack. What are we to make of that, Jennifer? Yasser Arafat may issue this condemnation. Look at this. We're seeing people applauding, clapping, smiling, happy to know that thousands of Americans have died in this sneak attack. And there you see a V for victory sign held up to the camera. What are we to make of that? And what are we to make of what about what Yasser Arafat said today?
The United States, blamed by some Palestinians for its ongoing support, as it is seen, of Israel in this conflict, in this Middle Eastern conflict. However, while some Palestinians were taking to the streets in apparent celebration, one youth was quoted as saying, as he received sweets handed around in celebration, "This is a sweet from Osama bin Laden," he said. Back to you.
Pat Dawson, thanks very much. We have some videotape, I understand, that we're going to show you from the West Bank. These are Palestinian celebrations in the wake of Tuesday's terror attacks in the United States. Apparently, Palestinians took to the street chanting, "God is great." People were throwing candy, distributing candy to passers-by. The U.S. government obviously has become increasingly unpopular, particularly in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, because Palestinians feel that the U.S. government has sided with Israel. One man, Nawal Abdel Fattah, wearing a long black dress, threw sweets in the air saying, actually that's a woman, pardon me, saying she was happy because, quote, "America is the head of the snake. America always stands by Israel in its war against us." Meanwhile, Yasser Arafat emerged to speak with reporters.
This was good for Israel. This was good for Israel. You understand? Meanwhile, the public in Israel, aware that the suicide bombings were continuing, took some comfort that Sharon and its national unity government were hitting back hard and taking out dozens of bad guys in response to the Pesach Seder massacre and others in that Black March of 2002, because it happened in 2002. There was a whole bunch of bad things happening. Sharon decides to invade the Blashes. I don't know if you remember what they call Operation Defensive Shield. Take a look at this.
20 years have passed since Israel launched a large-scale military operation into the West Bank, dubbed Operation Defensive Shield. The largest military intervention in the West Bank since the 1967 Six-Day War, aimed at dismantling terrorist networks and infrastructure. Defensive Shield began in response to the Second Intifada and a deadly terror attack that left 30 dead at the Park Hotel in Netanya. Then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon stated that the mission objectives were to capture terrorists and destroy terrorist infrastructure.
We are in a tough war with an enemy who is cruel and has bloodlust. We shouldn't lose hope or break down. We shouldn't fall to despair, even if the pain is terrible. And the pain is terrible.
The operation initially focused on the 6 largest cities in the West Bank, and in the end, paved the way for the construction of the so-called security fence, which ran more or less along the border between Israel and the West Bank. The barrier, which sparked much overseas criticism, divides Palestinian cities in the West Bank from Israeli cities and proved effective in stopping cross-border terrorist attacks. The full scale of the impact of the operation weren't apparent until years after the Second Intifada, when relative normalcy returned on both sides of the border.
I believe that it is possible to win, and with victory, peace will come to Israel.
Although the IDF largely withdrew from the Palestinian cities in May of 2002, 20 years later, it still enters them time from time, carrying out search and arrest operations, which are often resisted by locals.
So these are what I'm trying to say is like this. These are the current reality when you see these documentaries or TV shows, whatever. And you see Israel goes into Ramallah, Jenin, Beit Lechem, all the Arab cities, West Bank. They didn't do that before this. They didn't do that. They didn't go into the blotches. According to the Oslo Agreement, they have the right to do so, but they're not going to do so. In order to do this, you had to get the Haskam of America. And Sharon, believe me, when he went to see Bush, we should have this this tape there. We didn't have it, the 6-minute one. And you'll see, he went in and he showed Bush exactly what's going on and all the rest of it. And Bush gave it the okay. Notice he said, I understand why you're going in there. You're not trying to reconquer Ramallah. They don't want to take it over again. But they got to go in and basically kill the bad guys and then leave. This is happening today as we speak. I think you know this. Anyone who has relatives in the army or something like this knows. It's not only fighting in Gaza, as not only fighting in Lebanon, that's bad enough, there's plenty of stuff going on in the West Bank every day. They find out there's somebody here and there's somebody there. In Israel, they call it a ticking bomb, They find out somebody's planning to do something like that. And the precedent was set over here with the defensive shield, because basically they said to Arafat, we're not going to play by your rules. You get it? We're not going to play by your rules. You get to do this and this and this, and we keep pretending it's not coming from you, and you can prevent it, all the rest of it. So basically, it turned mamish into a war. Does anybody remember the Battle of Jenin, in which they said Israel carried out massacres and all this stuff, and Israel said it's not true. It was all in the press. They made a big deal about this in the press. Israel was, like they're doing now, it's a genocide and all the rest of it, which was not true, by the way. And that's another part of this kind of asymmetrical warfare. You try to get and spin the narrative. Ever since October 7th, they've been trying to spin the narrative. This is all the fault of Israel. I like the thing I saw, I don't know if you saw the other day, when he nominated Marco Rubio. They have something online in which the Arabs confronted him, and he says, it's all Hamas's fault. Everybody gets killed, it's all their fault. I want them all dead. I mean, the Hamas people. All the terrible stuff is happening. It is terrible. I agree with that. It's all their fault. Tell them to stop. It's how you spin the narrative. You see? How you spin the narrative. Anyway, from our vantage point today, it was a foreshadowing of the current Gaza war minus the tunnels, because they didn't have the tunnels back then. What I mean by that is you got to go into Arab houses. You got to watch out for ambushes. I mean, Israel's had to learn these things. That's where you get the high tech, the drones, the dogs, and all the rest of it. Because it's urban warfare. It's not, fighting on a battlefield in the desert somewhere. Arafat was furious. But George Bush backed Sharon because of what I just said. A big part of this was, if you remember, because they caught a ship bringing weapons illegally to the Palestinians, which they're not supposed to do. I think there was a North Korean connection, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was Iran, and Israel caught it, and they showed it to Bush, and Arafat denied it. Here it is, the current affair. So Israel found all this stuff. United States President Bush felt personally betrayed by Arafat when he had the evidence that top Palestinian officials were involved with the ship. The name of the ship was Karen A. And Arafat sent a letter to Bush denying any Palestinian involvement. According to Bush, Arafat has lied to me. I never trusted him again. In fact, I never spoke to him again. By 2002, I conceded that peace was not possible with him in power. According to Douglas Feith, Karen 8 episode hardened Dick Cheney's opinions of Arafat and convinced him that Arafat was part of the global terrorist network. So in other words, they caught with their pants down. At the end of the year came the Knesset elections. You hear what I said? 2003. Not the prime minister elections. They got rid of that. They went back to what we have now, which is there are leaders of parties and you run and then you see who gets what in the Knesset. The old system had been repealed. And it was a big win for Sharon. If you look at this, Likud got 38 and the Labor got half. They got double, plus the other parties. So this was personally a victory for his conduct of the war, even though he was not able to stop the bombings. All during this time, in spite of everything, until they really put that wall up, nothing could stop it. And even the wall is not perfect, but it's a lot better. So what we call a lot better is what we call peace, right? I mean, you know and I know, before October, there was still always stuff happening somewhere, right? Remember they shot people at the bus stop in front of a remote pull-in where my sister lives? I mean, and somebody ran a car into somebody else. I mean, you do these things from time to time. And if you live in Kiryat Arba, somebody's always stabbing somebody. But relatively speaking, they haven't had these mass bombings and things like that for a while. I'm afraid I'll tip to something. Over the next 2 years, the struggle between Sharon and Arafat will continue. But in that year, 2003, when they had the elections, America will end up getting into the Iraq war. And that will not be good for Arafat, because Arafat will not oppose Saddam Hussein. If you remember, in the first war, the Schwarzkopf War, Arafat and the Palestinians supported the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. I don't know if you remember that. So imagine how it makes Bush feel. You get it? Sharon will then imprison him, Arafat in Ramallah. I don't know if anybody remembers the Muqtada. He was trapped in a certain place and wouldn't let him out. Tell me he didn't starve or anything like that. He was screaming and complaining all the time on the news and whatever. Israel said, we're not going to let you go. And he will die there. Arafat will rage impotently, but he'll die right after the 2004 election, and Bush will be reelected. Now, so he didn't want Bush to be reelected. Okay? This was the Tuesday. By the way, since we all followed the Trump election the other day, it's an interesting map, right? In other words, the Democrats carried Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois, and they still lost. Isn't that interesting? And they did carry the same thing. So it's a funny, how it worked. That was John Kerry. The point is, that's on November 5th, November 11th, I think, or November 15th, Arafat dies. You see, of that year. So Sharon outlasted Arafat, and eventually the suicide bombers and other terrorist attacks decreased significantly, mainly because of the wall and all this new high-tech stuff. But did Ariel Sharon get peace? Did he get an end? Did he make a dent in Hamas? Unfortunately, with our perspective 2 decades later, the answer is no. And the bad guys are still not giving up. Right? The bad guys are still not giving up. And so we say Am Yisrael Chai, but they say no. And if you're religious, you end up saying like this. You hope for divine help. Right? You hope that our Father in heaven will see us through this. But they don't give up. And so somebody has to figure out, and they haven't figured out yet, somebody has to figure out some way, is there a tactic, to defeat somebody who doesn't give up trying to hurt you, other than killing each and every person, which doesn't seem to be feasible. This is the existential security problem of Israel. You get it? It's the existential security problem of Israel. And we saw the first round of this, you might say, with Israel punching back under Ariel Sharon in the years 2001 to 2004. That is the nature of the beast. And with that, I bid you good